streets of Columbus, Ohio, just after last call when neon bar signs still glow, but the law's patience runs thin. A solitary black motorist in a midnight blue Tesla eases to the curb miles from the marble columns of his courthouse office. Two patrol officers, nerves frayed from earlier chaos, mistake him for a rideshare driver cutting corners. Their hasty judgment detonates a chain of confrontations, revelations, and far-reaching reckonings that ricochet from squad car to Capitol Dome, reshaping trust. Before diving into the story, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the latest stories. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press 0. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Darius Cole hated motorcades. They sounded like tiny parades announcing privilege, and after a 14-hour day testifying in Washington about fentanyl trafficking, he craved invisibility. At John Glenn Columbus International, he ducked past a waiting state SUV, waved off the trooper who tried to carry his garment bag, and slid behind the wheel of his own midnight blue Tesla Model Y. His security detail knew the drill. Follow at a respectful distance, lights dark. Rain stippled the windshield as he merged onto I-670, the autopilot chiming softly. 20 minutes later, city lights bouncing off the low clouds, he rolled into the short North District where crowds staggered between neon-lit clubs and food truck aromas curled through the damp air. His phone buzzed with encrypted briefs, but outside, laughter crackled like static. A burst of sirens somewhere south made Darius flinch, though the sound faded. He eased to the curb near High Street, parking in a legal loading zone so he could answer a message from Deputy AG Carla Whitfield about a late-breaking subpoena. As he dictated a reply, a trio of drenched fraternity alumni barreled from a brewpub hollering, "Our Uber's the blue one up there." They zeroed in on his Tesla, pounding the hatch with sloppy fists. Darius cracked the window, calm but firm. "Gentlemen, I'm not your driver." A beer-soaked wrist thrust a phone through the gap, glowing map matching color car, and fingers jabbed his shoulder. He put the vehicle in park and prepared to dial 911, but flashing red and blues materialized first. Officer Trent Vogel, 32. Adrenaline still spiking from a bar fight call, leapt from a Franklin County Ford Explorer. His partner, Officer Marissa Mercer, rookie badge sheen barely dry, followed, rain slicking the brims of their caps. Dispatch had flagged an obstruction complaint, rideshare driver blocking bus lane, possible drunk patrons involved. Seeing a black man behind tinted glass and 3 white men pawing at the doors confirmed Vogel's internal script, another unlicensed Uber circumventing rules. He wrapped the driver's window with a maglite staccato. Darius lowered it fully this time. Before he could speak, Vogel barked, "Registration and rideshare permit now." "I'm not Uber, officer, just waiting for traffic to clear." Darius replied, voice steady, hands visible on the yoke. Mercer cued her body cam. Vogel forgot. One of the patrons, later identified as Ethan McCleary, sales manager with a 14 blood alcohol, decided to help, yanking the passenger door. The Tesla's childlike resistance enraged him. "Dude, quit pretending." "The app shows you right here," he slurred, thrusting the phone at Vogel, who nodded sagely, reading nothing. Darius inhaled, patience thinning. "Officer, please ask them to step back. They're mistaking me for someone else." Vogel's eyebrow rose. "License. Registration." Darius passed over his state driver's license bearing his photo, and in plain print, Honorable Darius A. Cole. Vogel flipped it, snorted. "Cute. You think impersonating an official makes this better?" He pocketed the ID instead of returning it, a violation that made Mercer frown. Inside the visor, Darius kept the requisite card stamped, "State of Ohio. Government-exempt vehicle." Yet the moment the magnetic strip beeped across Vogel's handheld scanner, the system lit up green, authenticated. That should have ended suspicion, but it deepened it. "Whose fleet plate did you steal?" Vogel muttered. He ordered Darius out, ignoring the rain pelting the suit jacket draped over the driver's seat. When Darius cited Ohio Revised Code Vir 4513.39 about unlawful orders, Mercer shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, step out so we can clear this misunderstanding," she interjected, but Vogel already had a grip on the door handle. Sentry mode cameras recorded everything in cinematic clarity, streaming to Darius's cloud account. Darius complied, palms out. The sidewalk cheers turned to heckles. McCleary filmed on Snapchat chanting, "5 stars if he gets tased." Mercer took the license back out, squinting at the tiny hologram of the state seal. "Trent, it scans legit," she whispered. But Vogel had already smelled phantom marijuana default justification. He announced a probable cause search. Darius, cuffs clicking around his wrists, calmly asked Vogel to articulate the odor's characteristics. Vogel pushed him against the quarter panel. A passing city bus splashed gutter water over all three, drenching Vogel's uniform and frying his radio. The optics escalated: soaked black professional in cuffs, white officer, dripping fury, smartphones everywhere. Inside the Tesla, Vogel rifled through the center console, tossing out a courtroom-ready copy of the Ohio Constitution, annotated in Darius's handwriting. Next, he tore open a sealed leather folio stamped with the Department of Justice crest, containing confidential opioid settlement drafts. Raindrops smeared ink across signatures worth $900 million. Mercer hissed, "Chain of custody, Trent," but he waved her off. The patrons had found a new thrill live-streaming Vogel's trash search while chanting, "Lock him up!" Darius, seated on the curb, breathed deliberately, recalling his father's phrase, "Dignity is a lifeline, not a luxury." He locked eyes with Mercer and said, barely audible, "Am I being detained or arrested?" She didn't answer. 15 minutes later, Vogel realized he needed an arrestable offense. He radioed for a K-9 claiming narcotic suspicion. Instead, Sergeant Julio Ramirez arrived, older and unamused. Ramirez recognized the cuffed man instantly. They had spoken at a fentanyl task force briefing 2 months earlier. "Good evening, General Cole," Ramirez said, pointed loud enough for every phone mic. Mercer's jaw dropped. Vogel's eyes darted like trapped wasps, then narrowed. "He's lying to you, Sarge." Ramirez requested Vogel's body cam footage. Only then did Vogel remember he had never toggled it on. Mercer's had run the whole time, feeding to the precinct's cloud. Rain slowed to a sprinkle. Sirens in the distance sounded suddenly ominous to Vogel. Back at the first precinct, the night desk buzzed with caffeine and gossip. Darius, now uncuffed but still soaked, sat beneath harsh fluorescence, while Ramirez phoned the watch commander. The binder of opioid documents lay warped on a steel desk, evidence of nothing but arrogance. Mercer printed an incident narrative stating probable smell of burnt cannabis and slid it across to Vogel for sign-off. He scrawled a signature but left the time blank a trick to retro-edit later. Ramirez confiscated the sheet, stapled it to the live timestamp printout, and photographed both with his own phone. Policy manuals thudded on desks as supervisors flipped pages under sudden legal anxiety. At 2:47 a.m., roughly 7 blocks away, freelance journalist Jada Givens refreshed X, the platform formerly Twitter, and saw "Not your Uber" trending at 36,000 posts. She traced the viral clip to McCleary's feed, sloppy zoom-drenched officer, calm black man quoting statutes. Jada cross-referenced the license name with public records and felt her pulse spike. Darius A. Cole, Ohio's 68th Attorney General, appointed only 8 months earlier after his predecessor resigned in scandal. She hit publish on a 50-word bulletin. National desks began waking editors. Governor Linda Barker was roused at 3:15 a.m. by her security aide tapping on the mansion's French doors. Bleary-eyed, she watched the leaked body cam feed on a tablet and muttered a string of rural Indiana profanities that hadn't crossed her lips in years. Barker's mind vaulted ahead, pending budget vote, fragile bipartisan coalition, the AG's lawsuit against 3 opioid distributors, a lawsuit popular across demographics. If the public perceived her administration as complicit in racist policing, negotiations could implode. She ordered her chief of staff to draft a statement praising Cole's composure and announcing an independent inquiry by sunrise. Then she placed a personal call to Darius, still at the precinct, apologizing and promising transparency. The apology created legal complications. Any admission from the governor might constitute executive influence. Darius, though grateful, asked her not to mention specifics and instead focus on systemic reform. He reminded Barker that the Department of Justice's Pattern and Practice Unit had dangled a possible consent decree over Columbus for months. This incident could tip the scale. She agreed, voice trembling, and urged him to let medical staff check his wrists. Bruises heal, he said, but documents don't. He meant the cloud uploads already mirrored on secure state servers. By 4:00 a.m., newsroom TVs glowed blue across the nation, looping the moment Vogel shoved coal into the rain. Cable pundits gorged on outrage before breakfast. While Vogel holed up in a union attorney's office, Mercer did something unusual for a rookie. She phoned Internal Affairs first. Captain Lin Nguyen answered on the second ring, listened without interrupting, and told Mercer to bring her body cam drive straight to IA before anyone else touched it. Mercer obeyed, eyes hollow. Nguyen copied the data to 3 air-gapped laptops, then sent Mercer's original to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation for integrity verification. Chain of custody locked. At 6:12 a.m., Vogel's attempt to erase his phone's messages triggered a departmental compliance alert technology the city adopted after previous scandals. Digital forensics captured the deletion logs seconds before factory reset completed an irony Vogel never appreciated. Morning commuters chugged coffee while fielding push notifications. Ohio AG detained by own police. Talk radio callers split along predictable lines until a new wrinkle emerged. A steelworker named Donella Pierce phoned WCOL and said she'd been stopped by Vogel last winter for driving while black on her own cul-de-sac. Within an hour, 5 more callers described similar humiliation. Journalist Jada Givens compiled complaints and realized they formed a pattern of precinct-approved pretext stops that happened mostly after 11 p.m. She tweeted a heat map. It went viral. The city attorney shuddered, picturing class action lawsuits. At an impromptu news conference outside the State House, Darius stepped to microphone still wearing his rain-spattered charcoal hoodie and blue jeans, a sartorial choice that mortified his communications director but thrilled the public. He recapped the night, factually ending with an announcement. Effective immediately, his office would open a civil rights investigation into Franklin County's traffic enforcement practices, invite DOJ oversight, and propose the Transparent Stops Act, mandating automatic plate verification training and GPS-synced body cam activation for all stops. Reporters peppered him with questions about personal feelings. He paused, then answered, "My feelings are irrelevant. What matters is that nobody should need a title to survive a routine interaction." The clip punctured any narrative that he was exploiting power. Meanwhile, a college sophomore named Miguel Aranda noticed that the first viral video's geolocation tag sat precisely beneath a pole where the city had installed a new 4K surveillance camera. He filed a public records request for that footage. City lawyers tried stalling, but Aranda's TikTok followers bombarded council offices until the mayor yielded. When the footage dropped 2 days later, it showed Vogel mouthing, "I hate these arrogant suits," a line his union rep had denied existed. Public sentiment shifted from outrage to fury. Sponsors began withdrawing from the annual police charity golf classic. The department's phone tree melted down. Desperation bred stupidity. 3 nights after the incident, an unknown assailant smashed the window of Darius's leased townhome and tossed in a burner phone loaded with fabricated texts, suggesting he had ordered officers' homes surveilled. Tesla Sentry Mode's fisheye lens, however, had recorded the culprit. Officer Raymond Dorsey, a buddy of Vogel's, previously disciplined for filing a false burglary report. The Providence Journal published still images side by side, Dorsey's face lit by dashboard light, phone in hand, indisputable. Federal prosecutors invited by Darius's deputy to avoid conflict of interest slapped Dorsey with obstruction of justice and computer fraud charges under 18 U.S.C. 1030. The investigation widened overnight, sniffing for conspiracy. Grand jury subpoenas flew like snow in January. Digital forensics unraveled a Telegram chat named Alpha Wolf hosting 14 officers who swapped memes ridiculing uppity professionals and boasting about a pullover quota. The chat log showed Vogel crowing, "Nobody checks my cam if I keep arrests up." Screenshots leaked to WBNB's investigative unit, which aired them in primetime ratings spiking. Sponsors for the Franklin County Police Benevolent Ball evaporated. The FOP local president went on cable sweat beating, insisting the screenshots were deepfakes only for DOJ lab analysts to verify metadata live on air. Public trust cratered alongside union credibility. Even unforeseen allies surfaced. Ethan McCleary, the drunk patron, sobered up, contacted Mercer, and asked how to share his raw video to prosecutors. It turned out Vogel was McCleary's cousin by marriage, a fact McCleary disclosed candidly before testifying that Vogel had urged him to delete the video. His cooperation undercut any defense narrative about drunken memory lapses. In a surreal twist, Hatter 5 stars. For Justice trended repurposing McCleary's earlier taunt into a fundraising slogan for a local legal aid fund aimed at fighting wrongful traffic stops. As spring warmed, Columbus Vogel's attorney petitioned for a venue change, arguing that viral publicity tainted the jury pool. Judge Amelia Hartman, a former public defender whose confirmation vote Darius had championed, denied it in a terse footnoted order, citing precedent from State v. Pierce. The ruling delighted law scholars for its dry wit. Hartman noted the defense had provided no evidence that TikTok is more prevalent in Franklin County than in, say, Wyoming. Vogel's face, once smug, now sagged behind tinted courthouse glass. Mercer, who had taken paid administrative leave, met with prosecutors and negotiated immunity in exchange for truth-telling. Her testimony, burnished by undeniable video, became the spine of the case. Trial opened with an overflow crowd and metal detectors calibrated to hairpin sensitivity. Assistant Attorney General Lila Price delivered an opening statement free of adjectives, letting video and statutes speak. When the footage paused on Vogel's sneer, a gasp rippled through spectators. Defense counsel tried painting Vogel as overworked, undertrained, but on cross Price unfurled payroll records showing Vogel had logged 3 voluntary 16-hour overtime shifts that week, each yielding time and a half pay, not under duress, but for profit. The jury's collective eyebrow arched. Then came Mercer, uniform-pressed voice shaking yet resolute. She testified Vogel had told her, "This is how we remind them who runs the streets." Pin-drop silence followed. Halfway through proceedings, an FBI lab technician introduced geofence data, proving Vogel's phone had pinged 5 times near the shattered window of Darius's home. Defense counsel objected. Judge Hartman overruled. In rebuttal, Vogel's side produced nothing. Jurors scribbled vigorously. Outside, demonstrators marched in silence, holding cardboard Tesla silhouettes, each wheel bearing names of past victims of pretext stops. The imagery embarrassed city leaders into fast-tracking a reform package requiring a supervisor's written approval for any probable cause claim based solely on odor. Cable hosts debated whether Columbus had inadvertently become the laboratory for 21st-century policing standards. Vogel was convicted on 5 counts: felony tampering with evidence, civil rights deprivation, under color of law, falsifying official documents, unlawful search, and aggravated menacing, each bolstered by his own chat logs. Judge Hartman, invoking Ohio sentencing guidelines, imposed 8 years plus mandatory bias correction training should he ever requalify for law enforcement. Mercer spared prison, received probation, and was accepted into a community mediation internship run by Danella Pierce, the steelworker turned activist. Internet opinion split. Some hailed redemption, others wanted harsher penalties. But even critics admitted Mercer's testimony cracked the blue wall. Darius declined to address sentencing, focusing instead on legislation. The Transparent Stops Act passed both houses with a 91-7 margin, stunning pundits. Governor Barker signed it at a public ceremony where she and Darius stood beside a cruiser retrofitted with automated dashcam triggers wired to brake sensors technology, donated by an Ohio-based startup that saw PR gold. Within months, 32 other states requested model bills. In academia, criminology departments redesigned curricula around what graduate students nicknamed the Cole Protocol, emphasizing dignity data and digital safeguards. Karmic echoes arrived slowly. The Franklin County Police Benevolent Association, hemorrhaging dues, downsized staff. Vogel denied bail pending appeal, wrote op-eds from prison claiming he was a scapegoat. The pieces went largely unread. Meanwhile, Mercer completed her internship and applied to law school, citing restorative justice as her calling. Donnella Pierce's Grassroots Fund passed $1 million assisting motorists across Ohio in contesting dubious citations. Street-side patrol cars began sitting conspicuously idle officers, wary of baseless stops, a change residents noticed in fewer traffic snarls and fewer viral videos. One humid July afternoon, Darius delivered a lecture at the Ohio Peace Officer Training Academy. He projected still frames from Vogel's body cam, freezing moments of decision, asking recruits to spot where the law ended and ego began. Recruits scribbled notes, some wiped eyes. In the front row sat a veteran named Lucy Weaver, who had arrested Darius's cousin years earlier. After class, she approached apologetic, admitting she'd replayed that arrest in her head since the video surfaced. Darius listened, neither absolving nor condemning, and invited her to join a community workshop. She agreed first in line. Across town, the city council unanimously voted to rename the short north loading zone where the incident began. A new street plaque now read Accountability Way, dedicated to the right to equal justice 2025. Tourists snapped selfies and local businesses printed the name on to-go coffee sleeves. Yet some residents grumbled, fearing gentrification or virtue signaling. Darius convened a midnight walk on the anniversary, bringing together skeptics and supporters. They traced the route of the events, pausing where Vogel had flicked the cuffs. Candles dotted the wet pavement. Rain began again, gentler this time, washing candle wax into rivulets that shimmered under streetlight like threads of reconciliation. 6 months post-incident, DOJ released its pattern and practice findings, citing a 27% reduction in discretionary stops citywide since adoption of the Cole Protocol. Insurance actuaries noted fewer civilian claims. Taxpayers saved money. When local reporters asked Darius if the results felt like vindication, he replied, "Vindication implies past wrong was personal. This is about future right being collective." That line framed the lead of a Pulitzer-winning series on modern policing reform. High school debate teams nationwide adopted the Columbus case as core material, and Sentry Mode footage replaced Miranda clips in criminal justice textbooks. A year to the day after his arrest, Darius faced a curious logistical snag. The Ohio State Fair had invited him to keynote its law enforcement appreciation luncheon, but the fairgrounds entrance lay beside the prison detail assigned community service. He arrived in an unmarked Chevy Bolt, wearing jeans and a linen shirt. Near a corndog booth, he spotted Vogel in an orange vest retrieving wind-blown napkins from the fencing. State policy forbade interaction, but Vogel looked up, shame and something like gratitude flickering. Darius handed a cold bottle of water to a guard who passed it to Vogel. No words. Yet every onlooker felt the gravity of that silent transaction. Later that afternoon, smartwatches buzzed statewide. President Grace Padilla had nominated Darius to serve as Solicitor General of the United States. Social feeds erupted praise predictably, and conspiracies inevitably. Cable pundits pulled up the rainy night footage again, now reframed as foreshadowing rather than scandal. Senate confirmation hearings showcased bipartisan admiration. Even critics admitted his composure under duress rivaled courtroom poise. In his opening testimony, Darius credited every officer who chooses curiosity over impulse. He also thanked Mercer by name, stunning the chamber into a quiet clap. The nomination sailed through 82 to 18. Mercer watched the confirmation on a break between civil procedure classes. When reporters approached, she declined comment but lifted her notebook. On it, she had scribbled, "Accountability is a door we all walk through eventually." That quote, too, went viral, appended to side-by-side photos, Mercer testifying, Mercer studying. Young cadets saw a narrative arc where consequences and growth coexisted. Recruitment videos adjusted tone, emphasizing empathy, and dropout rates dipped for the first time in a decade. Meanwhile, in Washington, Darius's first Supreme Court argument concerned voting rights access. Chief Justice Rodriguez complimented the clarity of his briefs. A reporter whispered that he'd drafted them during quiet hours on Amtrak rides, memories of that rainy Ohio night still fueling the work. Outside the marble steps, protesters and supporters mingled peacefully, some holding umbrellas stenciled with #NotYourUber in gold. The phrase, once snark, had morphed into shorthand for dignified resilience. Back in Columbus, police cadets now spend an entire training block watching the composite footage of the Tesla stop. Instructors pause at key seconds, prompting recruits. What assumption just occurred? What alternative action existed? Data shows recruits who complete the module issue 43% fewer discretionary citations in their first year. Residents notice. At neighborhood association meetings, complaints plummet. Instead, discussions revolve around streetlight repairs and festival permits, mundane, hopeful topics signaling a community finally breathing comfortably. Vogel's release date approaches quietly. He earns a vocational certificate in urban horticulture, tending tomatoes in the prison greenhouse. A counselor suggests therapy for moral injury. Vogel attends. Letters from his young niece, who watched his fall on television, push him to introspection. He drafts an essay titled, "The Night I Arrested Empathy," mailing it to Donnella Pierce, asking whether she might read it at a community forum. She agrees, but only if Vogel attends in person upon release. He marks the calendar, uncertain, yet willing. Darius hears of the essay through Pierce and surprises everyone by volunteering to facilitate the forum. Reporters expect fireworks, but instead witness frank conversation punctuated by uncomfortable silences and occasionally laughter. By evening's end, Vogel apologizes publicly, and Pierce, arms folded, says, "We'll judge the apology by deeds." No absolution, just a starting line. Outside, storm clouds rumble but never break the city's skyline, reflecting amber against them like a warning and a promise. Years later, when college documentaries recount the night a black driver was mistaken for an Uber and turned out to be the state's chief law enforcement officer, narrators emphasize not the sensational arrest, but the ripples, fewer dead-end stops, more community liaisons, policy templates exported nationwide. Students debate whether history hinges on accidents or agency. At the end, footage rolls of Darius stepping into the same midnight blue Tesla, now nicknamed Justice, checking mirrors, smiling slightly and pulling into traffic anonymous, once more trusting that the road ahead, though still imperfect, now bends a little more toward fairness, because people chose to act after seeing what happened when others didn't. Soon after the Supreme Court win, Darius sat under the Capitol Rotunda before the Senate Judiciary Committee, fielding questions on the proposed Federal Traffic Data Integrity Act legislation modeled after Ohio's reforms. Some senators lobbed softballs, others drilled with skeptical precision about privacy and states' rights. Darius answered each, citing case law sprinkled with stories of drivers from Appalachia to South Central Los Angeles who no longer feared that taillight bulbs were invitations to harassment. When a ranking member asked whether federal involvement might undermine community policing, Darius replied, "Data doesn't replace dialogue, it disciplines it." The phrase landed on newspaper front pages the next day, and the bill cleared Committee 15-7. Vogel, 3 years into his sentence, transferred to a minimum security farm camp where inmates cultivated an apple orchard supplying Ohio school cafeterias. The program's supervisor, surprised by Vogel's horticulture certificate, assigned him row mapping documenting tree health on digital tablets. For the first time, Vogel grappled with data collection used for constructive ends. He wrote in his journal that the orchard proved metrics can nourish rather than punish, a line Pierce later quoted at City Hall. In weekly restorative justice circles, Vogel described his night in the rain not as a wrongful moment, but as the culmination of every shortcut I'd normalized. Listening, other participants reconsidered their own shortcuts. Marissa Mercer graduated from Capital University Law School with honors, her cap tassel snapping in the breeze above a mask printed, hat accountability way. She joined the county public defender's office. Within months, she litigated the first successful suppression motion under the Transparent Stops Act, freeing a teenager whose furtive movement turned out to be switching Spotify playlists. The judge cited Mercer's own earlier testimony to Congress commending her evolution from participant to protector of rights. News outlets ran side-by-side images Mercer in uniform opposite Mercer at counsel table, both holding the same calm stare, a visual mantra that people are works in progress. One quiet November evening, Darius visited his father, Elijah Cole, retired postal clerk in the small ranch house where he'd grown up. They sat on the porch, steam rising from mugs of chicory coffee. Elijah had watched every hearing, clipping newspaper articles into a scrapbook but rarely commenting. Now he thumbed a page showing Darius beside the president. "I taught you to drive defensively, not to drive history," he joked, eyes glistening. Darius laughed, then grew serious. "Your reminders about dignity saved me that night." Elijah squeezed his son's shoulder and whispered, "Dignity is like blinkers. You don't realize how many see it until it's gone." For the first time since the ordeal, Darius allowed himself a long exhale. Corporate America also took notes. Ford Motor Company announced that all new Explorer police models would include factory-standard automatic body cam triggers and dash overlay telematics, citing the Ohio lessons. Stock tickers jumped. Municipalities lined up for grants funded by a bipartisan congressional deal reallocating forfeiture revenue. Civil rights groups applauded cautiously, warning that technology without transparency could still mutate. Darius echoed them on MSNBC, quipping, "A camera pointed the wrong way is just a mirror." Shareholders nevertheless celebrated. The marketplace had converted accountability into commodity. Indeed, surveillance questions intensified when high schoolers in Dayton staged a walkout, fearing the expanded trove of vehicle data might one day profile them. Darius accepted an invitation to their gymnasium, foregoing staff briefing books. He listened as students argued algorithmic bias. Carrying no slides, he sketched diagrams on a whiteboard explaining how anonymized auditing and civilian oversight boards could fence data. Then he invited volunteers to help draft the oversight bylaws. Within weeks, 2 students he'd met testified at the state senate, and amendments were appended. Critics still existed, but now they were part of the drafting room, not barricaded outside it. In the summer of 2029, dash cam footage captured another nighttime traffic stop. A black teenager named Khalil pulled for a broken taillight on U.S. Route 23. The officer, following Transparent Stops protocol, kept voice calm, narrated movements, verified plates instantly, and gave Khalil a repair voucher instead of a ticket. Khalil's father emailed Darius, "5 years ago, my boy might have come home scared. Tonight he came home educated." Darius replied, short and sincere, thanking the officer by name and forwarding commendation up the chain. That email chain ended up in the Library of Congress digital archive under the tag Model Civic Correspondence. The international echo arrived more quietly, but carried deep resonance. In Stockholm, researchers at the Karolinska Institute published a comparative study on cardiovascular stress among drivers during police encounters in 5 countries. Ohio's post-reform data, barely 3 years old, showed a 40% drop in measured cortisol spikes, eclipsing even nations lauded for progressive policing like Norway. The World Health Organization cited the finding in its annual Determinants of Urban Health report, linking procedural justice to tangible biological benefits. When journalists cornered Darius in Geneva after a human rights panel asking if he anticipated becoming an accidental public health advocate, he smiled. "I anticipated becoming a better listener," he said. On the flight home, he flipped through the report, noting every footnote that credited grassroots activists, rookie officers, teenagers with smartphones, and one chastened ex-cop who now measured orchard rows. Each citation reminded him that no reform was solitary. It was a relay baton passed from mistake to lesson, from indignity to deliberate care. At a local elementary school's career day, teachers parked Darius's blue Tesla in the gym screens, looping the Sentry footage with captions written by 3rd graders. "Always tell the truth." Students climbed inside, pretending to steer history through imaginary storms and flashing lights sustained by wild laughter. When one child asked whether the car was magic, the principal smiled. "No, the people who learned from it are." That evening, Darius pinned their crayon thank you beside legal memos, a reminder that policy lives through pencils and small hands too. If this night of rain, reckoning, and redemption moved you, let its echoes travel farther. By pressing the like button, you amplify every lesson etched on those wet streets. Sharing the video invites friends and skeptics alike to witness how accountability can rewrite any script, whether in a squad car, a courtroom, or a child's crayon drawing. Subscribing joins you to a community committed to stories where courage confronts complacency and actions bend history's arc toward justice. Tap the bell so you never miss tales that always challenge assumptions and celebrate resilience. Stay for the next chapter. Your voice and curiosity are the fuel that keep these journeys rolling forward together.